You're listening to Tell This Story. I'm Doug White, a veteran, retired law enforcement officer, and the author of Hiding in Plain Sight. This is a platform for those who serve in our families to share their experiences and help one another grow. This isn't therapy. It's truth, the tactics, and a way forward. It's an opportunity to become stronger than before, together. This episode is fueled by Polestar Coffee, veteran-owned and operated craft roasted coffee for people who live on the X. Use code THISSTORY at checkout for 10% off your order. Now let's get to work. Welcome to Tell This Story. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited for today's episode. This is someone that I have followed quietly for quite some time on social media. And one day I commented on a post. I couldn't take it anymore. So many of her posts were speaking to me, speaking about me. And I just had to say something. And when I did, we connected and it just has taken off from there. So without any further, let me introduce her. She's pretty amazing in what she's doing and how she's doing it all. Breanna Morgan. She's the founder of the Blue Crew. It's a 501c3 nonprofit serving first responders and their families in Upstate South Carolina. They do this through care packages, Leo boxes, and targeted fundraisers. The Blue Crew comes alongside law enforcement families facing injury, illness, catastrophic loss, or line of duty death. They build a community for law enforcement spouses through an online virtual network and meetups. Breanna grew up as the daughter of a law enforcement officer, now married to one. She's a full-time mom to 4 kids under 6. She's a CPR instructor, a small business owner. Oh yeah, by the way, she's also the founder of the Blue Crew. I think I mentioned that. In addition to all of those things, she's a vocal advocate for mental and physical health in the first responder world. Online, Breanna shares this little Blue Crew on Instagram, and that's where she talks candidly about marriage, motherhood, raising Leo kids, and the weight this work puts on families. She leads a growing effort to remind first responders and their families that they don't have to be a statistic, and they don't have to do this alone. Folks, I can't wait to get into this. I'm excited, and I've got questions for days. Please welcome, to tell this story, Breanna Morgan. Breanna, I've been waiting a while to get you on here, and for those that are just tuning in, you know, they've heard your bio, and I've got to tell you and everyone else who's listening, I am a huge fan of Little Blue Crew, what you're doing on social media, the stuff that you put out. If people aren't following you, they need to follow you. We'll get into all of that stuff as we continue, and of course, everything will be in the show notes. But I've got to tell you, I find myself inspired to just comment on everything that you put out, because I hear a lot of things that I wish I had heard and wish I had known throughout my career. And they speak to me, and often than not, I regret they speak about me. So it's fantastic what you're doing. But anyway, enough mumbling for me. Tell everybody who you are. What should we know about Breanna before we get started?
So I will try to summarize. First of all, thank you so much for having me. And you have built me up a lot, but I'm truly honored to be on your podcast and get to talk to you. I was honored to get to read your book. It's such a good read.
Thank you.
So basically, I am a grown law enforcement kid. So my dad was a law enforcement officer for most of my life. He started his career when I was 5 and he retired 2 years ago. So that's really all I knew growing up. And then I actually ended up being married to a cop. He wasn't a cop when we got married, but within our first year of marriage, he was going through the hiring process and became law enforcement. So I've known it as the kid and now as the spouse. And I'm also a mom to 4 kids. It was under 6, but the beginning of this month, my oldest just turned 6. So now I can say 4 kids, 6 and under.
Yeah, so like that's a difference.
It's a little bit better. It's a little bit better. So I am mostly a stay-at-home mom. I tell people I'm a stay-at-home mom. I do run a business as a CPR instructor. I've been doing that for 9 years this month. And then I also run the Little Blue Crew Instagram account and then the Blue Crew nonprofit that we just started actually in January of 2024 is when we launched. But in the past couple of months is when we finally, to be candid, had enough money to actually start doing things. And so we're kind of full bore trying to get that up and running and get some events scheduled and do all of that.
It was amazing. I considered the nonprofit route, and I was thinking, what should we do for a nonprofit? But looking at all the work that goes into it, my God. I mean, I've got friends that do it on a national scale, that have done it, scaled it, that are doing wonderful at it. You know, attorneys will say, hey, we'll fill out the paperwork for you and we'll charge you. And I still look even beyond that, and I'm afraid of it. So that's a heck of a thing. And I hate asking for money. And even if the cause is wonderful, I just, I don't know. I don't have that skill set. So bless you for doing that. That's
I don't have that skill set either. If it makes you feel any better, I don't have that skill set either.
But the bravery to jump into it.
We're working on it.
Yeah, but still to say, you know what? Let's do this and do it. I mean, that's crazy. So All right, let's get into this. So,
Already.
you've lived this life as a Leo kid, now as a Leo spouse. When you look back, what's the first memory that really captures what it means to grow up in a law enforcement family? What were your experiences growing up?
So I feel like my experience is not going to be very universal, primarily because my dad was federal law enforcement.
Okay.
So he was a postal inspector. Most people don't know what that is. But basically, on a very like practical sense, he did not wear a uniform every day. He wore business casual. He did have a gun and a badge and handcuffs and all of that he wore every day. But he didn't have a gun or he didn't have a uniform. He didn't have a marked car. And he also worked a quote unquote normal schedule. So we didn't
Okay.
have rotating shifts. He didn't work nights. He worked 10-hour days Monday through Friday. He obviously had call time on top of that, and it wasn't uncommon for him to get called out in the middle of the night or on weekends. But that wasn't like stereotypical if you have like a uniform cop that is your
Okay.
dad, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But to me, and it's almost hard for me to sit down and be like, oh, this was my experience because it's just so normal to me because
Mhm.
I don't really have anything to compare it to. So, I mean, obviously, it was as a 5-year-old when he started his career, it was just my dad is so cool. Like he carries a badge and a gun and he catches bad guys. And sometimes he can't be there, which isn't, fun when he has to get called out or whatever.
Mhm.
But other than that, I was the cool kid. Everybody was like, your dad has such a cool job. It wasn't until I was about 12 when he had a critical incident that it was like, oh, this is dangerous and he could have been killed today. That kind of mindset shifted for
Yeah.
me. But for me, I think it was just, I was so proud of him. It wasn't anything, it didn't really have a negative effect on our family. Even when he was gone, my mom took up the slack and I don't have any bad memories or traumatic memories of anything like that. It was really just it was a great experience. That's why I do what I do, because I think that it can be that way
Yeah.
for every law enforcement family. Unfortunately, it's just not. And a lot of factors go into that. But long story short, I think that was kind of my first memories of that is like, my dad has such a cool job. I have a picture when he got hired, when he first got his gear, wearing his police jacket, holding his handcuffs and his badge as a 5-year-old. So,
That's
like,
awesome.
very, very fond memories of his career starting.
That's very cool. Well, how did marrying into the profession change your perspective compared to like watching it as a kid?
Yeah. So when my husband was going through the application process, I was pregnant with our oldest. And I think my dad's critical incident, it definitely changed the way that I thought about the profession. And then 2 years before we got married, we had a local line of duty death, and his wife was pregnant with their daughter when he was killed. And
Mm.
so there were a lot of things that were very triggering to me through that process. And I always told him, I was like, I know for a fact this is God's will for you. This is the safest place for you to be. Just emotionally, I'm really struggling with that right now. So we were obviously able to work through that. He got hired when our oldest was 4 months old. And then that year, 8 months after that, we had a department line of duty death. That was also my dad's best friend, which I can kind of get into in a little bit. But we have jokingly said that, like, I don't feel like we've been able to really process in a normal way the start of his career until like the past 12 months, because it was just so much in survival mode. And then there was the line of duty death in our department. And then he was in field training, and then he was getting transferred. And then we had some family deaths that happened. So there was just a lot, not just law enforcement related, but a lot of it was. So it was hard, but it was because of those outside factors. It wasn't the job itself, I feel like, that made it so difficult.
I like what you just said there, and it got me thinking about something that I've said for years before I retired. And I think people on the outside and even people on the inside, like law enforcement leadership, they think that who you are and what you are is encapsulated in this 8 or 12 hour shift or this 20 or 25 or 30-year career. That this is the bubble. This is how they see their employee. And I think what sometimes they don't see or forget, just outright want to ignore, that when we join this profession, whether it's the military or the first responder disciplines, EMS, dispatching, whatever the case is, that we are between the ages of 18 and maybe 25. Some people are a little bit
Mhm.
more mature when they get in, but from that 18 to 25 years old to 20 or 30 years in a career, let's just say 18 to 55 is usually the sweet spot that you see for responders.
Mhm.
Arguably, now you spoke about the line of duty deaths, the family deaths, the children being born, starting a family. Between 18 and 30 and 55 years old, the greatest amount of things that are going to happen in your life is just the business of life, meeting the person that you fall in love with, your person, being married,
Right.
having kids, buying a house, losing parents, losing friends, a divorce, God forbid, losing a child. I mean, all of the big things that impact you
Mhm.
outside of your professional life are going on at the same time as all of the things impacting you in your professional life. And I think that sometimes leadership may lose sight of that.
Mhm.
And sometimes we may even lose sight of that ourselves. Like, hey, that was a bad call, but there's a life going on outside of your bad day at work.
Right.
You're not the
Right.
only person that had a bad day today. And
Mhm.
I love that a lot of your stuff points those things out. So anyway, back to you and not me rambling. But was there a specific call or an incident or a season in your own life where you thought to yourself, okay, we need more support than what exists right now? What
Yeah.
eventually became the Blue Crew?
So it was kind of almost like a cascade of events, and I'll speak to our marriage first, and
Okay.
then I'll kind of get into the nonprofit. So my husband actually skipped his academy graduation to attend Jumper's funeral. It was the same day, and so that it's almost hard to describe. The first time I saw my husband in class A's was at a funeral. It was supposed to be at his graduation, and it wasn't. It was at a funeral.
Wow.
And so it's really hard to not constantly have that thought in the back of your head when he's on shift, when that was what the career start. That's the picture in your
Yeah.
brain
Yeah.
of how his career started. And so I was struggling, but obviously didn't want to tell him that because I don't want him to be, get in his head like, oh, well, she's worried about me. She doesn't think I'm going to be safe, XYZ. He was also struggling, but he didn't want to admit that. And so this went on for a while until June of 2021. So it was not quite a year later. We had another local line of duty death, and it was someone who was the same age as my husband, department over from us. And his wife was newly pregnant. And this was about a month before I got pregnant with our third. And that was kind of like the catalyst for us getting to the point where we realized we are not communicating. We are not dealing with our own emotions. We are not coping in a healthy way. And this is affecting our marriage. We need some outside help. And so for us, we got with the department counselor and we had several sessions. We met together. I think some couples do need to meet separately, probably with a therapist, but for us, it was better for us to meet together. And if for no other reason, having that third party there to kind of guide our conversations and help us realize we're not talking about things like we should be because we're both trying to protect each other from each other's feelings when in reality that was actually making the problem worse and we were actually hurting each other by not telling. I was hurting him by saying, hey, like, I'm really struggling with worrying about you. Like, this has been a lot. So that was kind of the catalyst. And I feel like since that point, it was several months of going to therapy and working through all of that, that I feel like we are in a good spot, not because we never struggle with it, not because we don't snap at each other, we don't, we do everything perfectly, but because now after going through that, we do have the communication tools to sit down and be like, hey, we're not communicating, or something is going on with you. We need to talk about it. So that was kind of the catalyst for in our marriage specifically. And then through that, it really got me thinking about like, everybody is going through this. Different things may cause those issues. It may not be the exact same circumstances for everybody, but everybody's going through this, but nobody's talking about it. And that was the biggest thing to me is like, we're not the only law enforcement couple to have gone through this, to have struggled with this, but how come we had to figure it out for ourselves? How come we had to go and seek out help and resources? And so that was kind of when the idea of the Blue Cruise started. It was kind of that in combination with wanting to provide care packages for if there was a line of duty injury or some kind of illness or something like that with law enforcement families, just to be that encouragement.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't see that happening. A lot of law enforcement families are just going through everything alone, sucking it up, going to work, doing what you need to do. And they're not really being taken care of. So that is kind of the long story short of how we got to where we are with the nonprofit.
I love that. And circling back to the marriage, back 100 years ago, I was a young supervisor and I was on the midnight shift and I had a very, very junior crew. I mean, I had, I think my youngest deputy was 3 weeks out of field training and
wow.
the senior person was 3 years on. And so here I am, a new supervisor. I've got a sergeant who is just, he was non-existent. My first night, he told me, I'm retiring in 18 months and it's my job to teach you in that 18 months everything you need to know to be a sergeant. I think to myself, I've been adopted. I have a mentor. What he meant to say was, I'm not doing a damn thing for the next 18 months. This is your squad. Deuces. So with that, it was a really rough time. We had probably close to a dozen law enforcement line of duty deaths in the first 2 months of that year. 7 of them were in Florida. And so with a young crew with new girlfriends, new fiancés, new wives, and myself as a new supervisor, my wife took on role of the boss's wife. So she was now getting calls from these young deputies, girlfriends, wives, and fiancés. How do we feel about this? They're working night shifts. How do you deal with this? So she was taking on a lot of those things along with being at home with a 4 and a 6-year-old, going through the same things quietly herself.
Right.
Now she's taking on, the worries of these younger ladies too. And I just thought, hey, how awesome is that for you, and how strong of you to be the boss's wife and, mentoring these young ladies. And never once did I think, and shame on me for this in retrospect, but never once did I think, hey, this has got to be a lot on you, because not only are you carrying your own worries and our own children and all of those things, but now you're carrying this for others. The reason I'm telling you all of that is because, one, I didn't recognize it. We weren't communicating well. We were basically running the business of having a family while I went off to work and did things. But she started looking for some of those things, the Facebook groups and all of that stuff. This was back in 2010, 2011. And none of that stuff existed. And the ones that she found were these Leo wives and first responder wives pages. And it was nothing but, my husband's a sergeant, and, he's wonderful, and he does all of these things, and this agency sucks because of this, and this agency did this. And it was nothing but poison. It just, there was nothing there that was supportive like we see today. And I would like to think that it's an adaptation because people like you saw a need and started doing it the healthy way. And younger first responder spouses started coming in who are more emotionally intelligent than my generation, the suck it up and drive on generation, that they decided, hey, maybe this is a healthy thing and maybe there's a gap here that we can stand in. But that stuff didn't exist when I was coming up, and it really isn't there now. In fact, I don't know of any first responder, active or retired, is speaking out about their part in the things that they did wrong in their marriage, so others won't, follow into that. So anyway, all of that. But, I've got to ask you, from where you are as a spouse, as a mom, nonprofit founder, all of the things in this first responder space, what do you see as the biggest barrier to keeping first responders from asking for help early?
They're first responders.
Really?
So, and the reason I'm so quick to say that is
You've been waiting for that question.
I have seen just through, this year will be 2 years that I have really posted on the Little Blue Crew. And in person, I don't get this. It seems like it's the keyboard warriors in the first responder realm.
What?
But it's like, if I say anything, the post that you just commented on this morning, for example, talking about just being alone at night with the kids and how it's just a lot. It's not negating his hard on shift, but it is hard being the only one that's home at night with the kids. And I got a troll comment on that, and the guy did actually end up messaging me, and he's like, I looked into your page and I want to resend my comment. But it is
put a pin in that real quick. Look, if you're going to be, hey, wait a second, this is my podcast. I don't have to ask your permission. If you're going to be a dick and troll somebody and call them out publicly, character demands, and everybody listening to this with moral courage and all that stuff, character demands that you apologize in the same public forum that you were a shit in. Don't sneak off to the side and say, oh, I'm sorry I did that. No.
Yeah.
Put on your big kid pants. If you're going to be an asshole in public, you better own it in public. Sorry. That's a hot button for me, but
I totally agree. And I also will usually,
what a dick.
I'll screenshot comments and I don't block out the username because I have the same philosophy. I'm like, you commented publicly where everybody can see. If I'm posting it, why does that bother you?
Yeah, if you're going to take your shot, you better stand there and receive incoming.
Exactly. Yep. But I think for me, throughout my 2 years of posting, I can handle, the ACAP comments and the, we hate police. I got that. I expect that. It's the comments and the repost and even people taking my content and reposting it on other pages to make fun of it That is what really got to me. I'm going to drop his username. Anti-TikTok cop was one of them. And it's this accusation of if you say anything about what you've struggled with, how hard it is to be married to a cop, anything like that, you get labeled, you're posting it for clout, you're going to get your husband fired. You're basically the law enforcement version of a dependa, is basically
Wow.
what it is. And that's what I've dealt with. And sometimes I take breaks because it's a lot to be berated like that constantly. But I just try, and I would love to have a conversation with these people, but they won't have a conversation with me. They just want to repost it for their own clout, I guess. But I just want to tell them, like, you do realize this is the problem. You're bragging about being on your third marriage. Your kids don't talk to you. You might be a great proactive cop, which we can, define proactive however you want to define it, but you will still not acknowledge the fact that our divorce rate is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
We keep losing people to suicide. We have people that die very soon after retirement because of all of the physical issues they have from not taking care of themselves after they but we don't want to have that conversation. We just want to make fun of somebody's spouse who was actually trying to make a difference. That's why I was so quick to say that, is because that's what I have seen over these past 2 years in the online space, is these guys who, I guess they don't have anything better to do because they're not married anymore, just starting fights on content like this because they think that it's stupid.
I've been following your stuff quietly for quite some time, and I have found some things that I find hard to swallow, not because it's not true, but because it's so true that it's a mirror that I have to look at it. I was like, yeah, that was me. Now I've owned my stuff,
right.
And I'm atoning, or I've atoned and atoning still for the things that I got wrong. And that's why I think the majority of what I do now is because I was wrong. I mean, I told an academy class on Friday, but before the keynote, to like, hey, look, this book that I'm giving you, this is a how not to some this is a cautionary tale. And for some of you, you're not going to believe it. It's going to turn into a crystal ball. Don't let it be a crystal ball. With some of the Leo spouses stuff that I see out there now. Sorry, my wife just texted me on my watch. I love you today. I'm not taking that out either. So she completely derailed me. Oh, Michelle. So I see some of these spousal pages, and some of them do come off a bit, poor me, I'm married to a cop or a firefighter, single parenting again. Okay, look, I get it. I'm not living your life. I can't comment on your life because this is your perception of it. And one of the pages that I really, really like, the Proud Police Wife, Becca Lynn. She has a lot of stuff out there. She's doing a lot of great things for Leo and specifically Leo spouses. But several months ago, there was this trend where people were asking the AI, whatever engine you use, to make a 3D action figure of a police wife or whatever the case is. And they would upload a picture of themselves and describe what they wanted. Hers was, her dressed up, or, a 3D figure of dressed up and, with the little bento boxes full of lunches and meal prepped and all this, the front leaning Leo wife. I'm here to take care of my Leo and be protective. And I was like, hey, that is so cool. Then some of them started posting, a mom who looked like she was homeless with a baby on the hip. The baby was crying. The diaper was full, handcuffs laying on the floor, black socks all over the place, hair frazzled and everything else like that. And I was like, you know what? I understand that may be the reality on some days, that, when your spouse, the Leo version or the Leo part is pulling 1%, whether that's their capacity or that's all they can give. And on most days, y'all are pulling 75 to 99% of the weight. I get that. And it made my heart hurt when I saw that, because for me, in my experience, looking at Michelle, I know that there are days that she felt like that action figure looked, but I never saw that. All I saw was the strength and the power that it took for her to keep our two kids going, and all of the events and things that they did, all of the stuff that she did, her extracurriculars, her work, and managing me and keeping up with that. And of course, coming back and looking at the bigger picture of where I went wrong for so many years, my vision of my perception of her being strong then was even bolstered by that, because on the days that I wasn't carrying 2%, she carried that 97 or 99%, and it was the majority of our marriage. And I just wish that first responders would see that in their spouses and realize, hey, they are carrying weight that they're not showing, and that you need to pull your weight. And I wish that first responder spouses would see themselves as the superhero that we see. And I hope that makes sense. I really do.
It does. Yeah.
I really do.
I think it's I think it's, I always tell people, I don't think this is unique to just first responders. I
No.
think it's a universal marriage problem where you just aren't viewing your marriage and your family and your house as a true partnership. And like you said, some days my husband is barely given 1% at home, and that's fine. That would be a me problem if I tried to make him feel guilty for that. But the caveat to that would be there are some days I can barely pull 1% out.
Yeah.
And he steps up, and it's not me resenting him when he can't. It's not him resenting me when I can't. It's having that conversation. It's understanding that like we're working together towards the same goal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when saying the conversation, having hard conversations like that, being intentional to have those hard conversations, to ask for help, neither partner in a relationship is a mind reader. But sometimes having those hard conversations, to be honest with you, there are times in my own career that I'd rather go out front and get into a gunfight. That's easy.
Huh?
I know I'm relatively sure that I'm trained for this and I can win that
Yep.
one. And coming into it with, okay, we're going to have an argument. I'm going to win this one. Stop.
Right.
I don't recommend
Right.
coming in with, I'm going to win this one or
Yeah.
she's not getting away with this mindset, because
Right.
you ain't going to win.
Yep.
But
Or one thing that I don't say it as much anymore, but when we were really struggling, there were times that he would say something to me, or it's just the way his demeanor changed. I would look at him and I say, "Hey, I'm not a call for service," because I could tell he was getting, and I mean, it
Ooh.
was not like he would never yelled at me. He was never like nothing violent, anything like that. Obviously, I always tell people the caveat: if somebody's acting like that, you need to get help. But
Yes,
I could
yes.
tell his demeanor changed. And I was like, "Hey, I'm not a call for service."
Mm.
So it's similar mindset. You've got to, and I've told him that before. I'm like, I understand that like feelings are really scary, but like we need to talk about them sometimes. Because he's, just like you. Have me run into a school, I can do that. You have me sit down and tell you how I'm feeling, I cannot do that.
Yeah, no, I'm not prepared for that, because it's uncomfortable. I'm going to have to own things that I've done wrong, and I have to sit here and hear the things that I've done wrong. Well, when you said I'm not a call for service, that yikes. I would like to say, oh, good for you, but I've heard that, and that hurts. That hurts. When you're in the middle of a conversation and you feel that knife hand coming up. Oh, let me explain. No, that doesn't work well in a marriage.
Yep. And I mean, I've gotten that way with him too. So I'm not saying like I was always in the right, because I definitely was not. But yeah, that was definitely a phrase I used a little bit.
All right. So our peers are the biggest reason we don't ask for help.
That's just my opinion. But
And I see that. I see that. Yeah. Yeah. And if you can't go to your workmate about that stuff without feeling like you're going to be either ostracized or kicked out of the tribe or made fun of, or they're going to use it at some point, how in the world can you possibly go to your leadership?
Mhm.
So no, I understand that. When somebody that's in your vast network messages you and says something, along the lines of, hey, I'm worried about my officer. What was the first thing that you would tell them? Like, I'm worried about their safety, or I'm worried about,
Mhm.
how are we going to communicate? Or I don't know that I'm going to get through this season. What was a piece of advice that you'd give to them?
So I try to be very careful with my platform,
Mhm.
and I don't ever want to come across as something that I'm not. And I tell people that I'm very upfront. Like, I am not equipped to help you through this.
Yeah.
An Instagram DM is not the place for me to be giving you marriage advice. And so I do have one of my best friends in that space. Lauren is a mental health professional, and she has actually directly connected with some of my followers before. I'll start a group chat. She'll give them her phone number, and she's able to connect them and kind of walk them through that step. But if it's something, like a minor communication thing, or like hey, have you dealt with this? I'll engage in conversation, of course, because I always want to help. But if someone is, if we're getting borderline, you're worried for your safety, anything like that, I'm immediately bringing in, help, and I'm giving them the resources. I'm not obviously, turning them in or anything, but just giving them the resources to someone who can help them, because I am not that person. I am not equipped to handle that. I don't want to potentially make anything worse.
Yeah.
So I will refer people out.
No, that's very responsible. I think with my own platform, I've said this several times, and I felt horrible having said this, that I can't help you get to where I am. I can show you where I was and tell you how I got
Right.
here, but I can't go back and pick you up and walk that walk with you.
Right.
And for a while, I felt horrible, but I realized that I have to have that boundary, because I don't have
Mhm.
the capacity to be there again.
Right.
So no, that's awesome that you have that resources and you give those resources. I think it's very important to know that stuff and not try to manage it all yourself. Yeah, that's amazing. But if it was one of those, hey, we're not communicating well, and it's something that you've experienced, something not
Mhm.
it's not dangerous, it's not a catastrophic, but hey, Brianna, how do you communicate with your husband when he's had a bad day, or you've had a bad day and you need to communicate that to him? What piece of advice would you give there?
I always like to preface things. You can tell I don't like to be super black and white
Yeah.
because I know everybody handles things
Yes.
differently. Everybody has a different dynamic in their marriage. And so what works for me and my husband may not work for who I'm talking to. But I just try to present it as like, here's some things that I would try. If he came home and he had a bad call that day or it was just a bad shift in general, you don't want to just jump in and force a conversation. I think a lot of times, or even what my husband and I have developed is text me a number. If you don't have the words, text me a number so I kind of know where we are on the scale when
Okay.
you get home. And there have been times where I will time it. I will take the kids out on a car ride to like the car wash or grocery pickup when he gets home. So he has about half an hour to an hour to decompress in the house by himself. And then he's ready to kind of jump in and be husband and father. So that's something that we've tried. There are times where, he'll just kind of push through. We just don't talk about it. We co-parent in that sense, for the kids so they still get daddy time. And then after they go to bed, if he wants to talk about it, we can talk about it. Sometimes it's days later. I think the hardest thing for a lot of these spouses to kind of figure out is when should I push and when should I not? And I think that is such a hard balance to strike because there is the time to not say anything, to let them know that you're there, but not push. But for me personally, and my husband would say this too if he was sitting right here, there does come a time where I have to be like, hey, you're not dealing with this in a healthy way. You need to talk about it. We need to do something. We need to, whether that's going to therapy, that's, hey, you might need to go work out and get some feelings out. Also, it's okay to cry. Like, I don't care if you're a man, it's okay to cry. That's not a sign of weakness or anything. So I kind of just throw all of that at them and be like, maybe just try it. And if something isn't working for you, I always tell them take it or leave it. If it works, great. If not, try something else. But I think just putting the effort in and figuring out a system that works for both of you, because again, you're gonna cope different
Yeah.
ways, but just figuring out, and this is when therapy can be helpful too, figuring out like a number system so you know how he's coming home. Vice versa, he knows what kind of chaos he's walking into when he gets home. But just it always comes back to that communication. You have to have that communication, or it's just going to continue to drive a wedge between the two of you.
No, I agree with that. Everything you said was beautiful. And again, I wish I had that 20 years ago. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Somebody actually, I was on her podcast yesterday. It'll be coming out at end of December. But Dr. Medina Baumgart, Surviving Retirement, she speaks to the communication piece. And when I started going to counseling, and Michelle and I started going to counseling together, the whole communication bit was something that we were each other's best friends, but we didn't have that communication piece.
Hmm.
So communications, a conversation would be prefaced first by, can we talk? Or do you have time
Hmm.
to talk to me about this?
Right.
Well, if you're good at communicating or you get better at communicating, it's just a conversation. And it's not, you don't have to set aside time. You just start speaking to each other and see
Hmm.
where it goes. And we do that now, and it's fantastic. There's no setting this thing up. It's just a conversation. And
Right.
I would tell the first responders out there, check to see how you're showing up when you get home. If you don't have that time to decompress after a long shift, I think the advice that you gave and just the tips that you just gave are fantastic. But also from the first responder side, be ready to communicate. I'm not talking about a
Hmm.
trauma dump or anything like that, but say I've had a rough day. This is why I had a rough day. It was, this type of call, and this is how it's going to be for me for the night. Whatever the
Hmm.
case is, because I've
Right.
found that if we don't communicate that to our spouse, if there's a history of coming home in a bad mood and we don't communicate why it's a bad mood, our spouse is going to internalize that and think to themselves, what have I done this time?
100%.
And
Yep.
that's not fair, because one, you're expecting them to be a mind reader, not fair. Two, they're internalizing that and they think that they're the problem when in fact it's our lack of communication that is the problem. And that could just be just a slippery slope of miscommunication that winds up into this big ball of resentment that never had to happen.
Right.
So no, that's great advice. And now you said, how long have you been married? Like 7 years?
Next month will be next 10 years.
Wow. And you've learned all of this about being a cop wife, about communicating, about being a mom, doing all of these things. You've crammed all of this experience, knowledge, and wisdom in 7 years?
Well, I feel like I had a cheat code a little bit with my in-laws and my parents. So this open communication, the marriage principles, the equal partnership, my husband and I were both raised with that. And
Okay,
so I feel like we had a head start there. There were obviously
good.
some things we had to learn with our parents each only had two kids and they were a little bit spread further apart than ours were. So that's been different and navigating, being a small business owner and also him being, a local cop, not working a normal schedule. Obviously we've had to learn and adapt. And again, both of us, I think, have just tried to take in as much, whether it be books or podcasts or,
Mhm.
people that we've connected with and in therapy and just trying to make sure that we are doing everything in our power to set ourselves up for success in marriage, but also to deal with our own emotions in a healthy way so that we can be there for our kids and we
Yeah,
can model that for our kids.
yeah. Well, even with that leg up, I mean, you have packed a lot of good stuff in 7 years. It's
Well, thank
impressive.
you.
What's helped your marriage? Well, you just answered that. I was gonna ask what's helped your marriage stay grounded when the schedule, the stress, and hypervigilance, and all of the worldly things are stacked against you, but you said that. You had, good examples growing up, and you've just kinda modified to fit where you're at now.
It's that, and then it's all God, and I always tell people that it's not because it is anything in my husband or anything in me, because and he'll tell you this too, I'm selfish. If I wake up every morning, it's not like I'm like, "Oh, how can I best serve him today?" Sometimes I have to get my coffee
Mhm.
first before I'm thinking about that, but our marriage was founded on Christ, and we have made, the choice, we make the choice every day to choose each other because that covenant that we made before God, it's very important, and we have no intention on breaking that.
It is. I agree with that, and I support that wholeheartedly. People will talk about if you're gonna go get counseling, make sure that, they're culturally competent, so you don't have to explain things to them. Well, I will first say as far as my person, Michelle, she's my first responder. She's my culturally competent counselor. She held my hand more than 25 years ago at an altar and said, "I do." She chose me, and, most nights she sits next to me on the couch, or we hold hands walking the block after dinner. There's a lot to be said for who you pick as your partner.
Mhm.
They can make or break you, and I'm certainly no stranger to the importance of that. So, to your social media and storytelling and real talk and the things that you're putting out in the world, at little dot blue, you blend humor, hard truth, just real family moments. But when you hit post, what is your goal? What are your thoughts for the person on the other side of the screen? What are you hoping that they're getting from that?
I am just hoping that they find it relatable and encouraging. I established when I first started that I would not care about the number of followers, the number of likes, the number of comments, because I don't think if you're doing it for that, you're doing it for the right reasons.
Agree.
So if I can connect with one person, if a post can make one person feel seen, or if it can be something that you and your husband both laugh about, one evening when you're decompressing, that is my goal. It's never been about the numbers. I'm not looking for a certain percentage of engagement. I just want to be that space for people to be encouraged, to feel like their marriage is being supported, to feel like they're being supported in raising their kids. And also, and this is kind of a little bit more niche of me specifically, that's not necessarily the same with all other quote unquote Leo wife or police wife content, but also trying to bridge the gap. There's a lot of spouses that don't really know anything about law enforcement
Mhm.
and they don't really understand the inside jokes or the things that happen or the interdepartment politics. And so I do, just because I was raised with it. And I was the one who had the law enforcement experience before my husband because he wasn't raised with it. And so I think that perspective is valuable too. I don't really like how some spouses kind of just take this isolationist mentality about the profession. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, he just needs to leave work at work. So I try to blend that in a little bit too. And I think sometimes it is helpful. Yeah, a lot of it speaks to the spouse, but I think I've also had some spouses who are like, oh, I never thought about that. I didn't realize he was dealing with that or something like that.
Well, and you're also speaking, hopefully it's more than just me that's a first responder looking at this stuff. This going into your page and looking at those things, if you're looking how to fix yourself or fix your marriage, it's a cheat code. It really is. I mean, if I don't want to do the hard work of sitting down and speaking to my wife to find out what the problem is, which is what you should do, your page does it. you've got the raw insight there that this is what's going on. This is what we're feeling. And, spouses, if you're listening, take a look at that page and look at it from the perspective of no ego and not being offended. And you'll hear those, the calls for help. It's pretty clear. Some of them have hit me right in the face, and I wasn't appreciative of it initially, but once I sat with it for a bit, I was very appreciative. So what kind of messages? I know we talked about some of the trolls and the jerks that are out there, but on the positive side, what kind of messages? What's the feedback you're getting from spouses and officers? And, do they tell you anything about where the culture of being a first responder is now?
I think a lot of the messages that I get are really a lot of it is I feel seen. I've been struggling with this or I'm in a similar boat. We just went through a work-related injury with my
Mhm.
husband, and so I posted some about that with my stories, and there were at least 3 of my, I call them OG followers. They've been with me from the beginning, and they messaged, and they were also navigating a very similar timeline. One was a critical incident, and I think 2 were other on-the-job injuries, and so just being able to be that sense of community for them because, again, not every department really rallies around the family and the officer when something like that
Yeah.
happens. And so some people are searching for that. I'm always encouraging people, you don't have to only have cop friends, but on the other hand of that, it is very helpful to have people who do understand that element of it and they do understand what you're going through and they've walked a similar path. So just, thank you for being relatable. Thank you for posting this. I have had several first responders message me and be like, this is my wife, like, thank you for posting this. I'm sending this to my wife or something like that. Or if I'm, calling out an issue within the profession, people are like, thank you for saying that, or something like that. So I do get a lot of that positive, and I'm very, very appreciative for that. I don't want to ever come across as like, I feel like I'm the greatest thing ever because I actually said what everyone was thinking. But I do get a great sense of fulfillment in knowing that it is helping people and it's encouraging people. It's also I know from people that have messaged me, they've said, like, I started a get together with the wives at our department, or, I actually started checking on somebody after I saw your post. And that is what really means the world to me. Or somebody will be like, oh, we put together a care package like you did because somebody got hurt. Just inspiring people to do that in their little community, wherever they are, all over the country. That's really my goal. I want to foster that sense of community off of social media as much as I can because you can only do so much behind a phone. I feel like
Yeah.
that face to face, tactically doing things for people is what I want to inspire people to do.
That's awesome. Leadership is contagious. All it takes is one person to step up and do it. That's awesome. If there was a chief, sheriff, union president, whatever, if they were listening right now, and probably not, because we do a lot of calling out poor leadership here. But anyway, if they started tuning in, they want to support their people better. What's one thing that you feel that they could do this month that would make a difference for their people? What would you like to
I
see?
think I think you need to do something for your families that doesn't involve alcohol. And I
God.
say that specifically. It needs to be where you're actually the families are getting to know each other. I think so much of the camaraderie and the brotherhood, so to speak, is always around alcohol. Like, I'm going to go leave my family. We're going to go have a bonfire in the middle of the night. We're going to go out bar hopping after shift. We're going to do something like that, which, in my personal opinion, again, just my opinion, I feel like breeds all of these marriage and family issues within the profession. And I really think if admin would step up and acknowledge the role that the spouses and the children play in the career, and included them more, there would be a big shift in the profession as a whole.
Yes, if you're listening on Spotify, you can't see my smile right now, but I agree wholeheartedly with, well, every bit of that. The graduation that I spoke at on Friday, I actually said to the leadership in the room, there were several sheriffs and chiefs in there, and I said that, your agency has grown by at least double today because these young officers and deputies come with spouses and families, and now
Mhm.
you're responsible for their hopes and dreams as well. And I even challenged him. I said, the burden of leadership is also the privilege that being able to lead these people and understand that your moral courage and the decisions you make have an impact on them as
Yep.
they go home and as they serve our profession. And I think leadership plays a huge role in this. Well, one, in the culture, the old days of the choir practice between shifts. I've done it. I've been there. And you're right. It does breed all the problems. I remember as a young recruit, and this is horrible to say this, but as a younger officer or deputy going to these parties, these squad parties, with my, fiance or young bride, that when you meet somebody, don't just assume that that's your spouse and don't assume that you're going to see them again.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, I thought I already met your wife. Yeah, no, there's going to be problems for me when I get back to work. And unfortunately, that's the way that it was, and it may still be. But you're right, that camaraderie is not there anymore, and if it is, it's usually surrounding alcohol. I remember going to squad and platoon parties, just standing there at the island in the kitchen or sitting around a table and just holding court, telling old stories, sipping on bourbon.
Mhm.
And why is this bottle empty? Who drank this bourbon? Just
Yeah.
me? Wow. And it's wholly unhealthy. So yeah, doing stuff for the spouses, I feel like that's the key, honestly, for maybe not just for the profession initially, but to make sure that your personnel are whole and the families are
Uh-huh.
intact. I believe that's going to translate to how they show up at work as well.
Yep.
Um,
100%.
so in fact, I even said that at the graduation that being a good husband or wife, mother or father makes you a better law enforcement officer, not the other way around.
Yep.
And I'll tell you that from experience because I did it the wrong way. So same question, but for the spouse, for the spouse that's feeling isolated or burnt out, what's the first low risk step that they can take towards connection or finding help?
I think you have to just acknowledge what you're feeling. I think there's a lot of you spoke to the Facebook groups a little bit ago when we were talking, and the Facebook groups are horrible. I'm just gonna say that. I
They're
can be on
the ones that
record
I've
saying
seen
that.
are complete garbage. It's awful.
They're horrible.
Yeah.
It's your husband is cheating on you. That is the moral of pretty much any post on there. Your husband is cheating on you. And so when you're reading that constantly, it starts to get in your head and you start to overanalyze everything. And then you also, I feel what I have found is you start to give yourself a free pass for the way that you're treating him and you're not dealing with your own emotions. So I feel like whatever end of the spectrum, if you're worried about that, if you're just worried about his safety, or if you just feel like I'm really burnt out and he's constantly picking up side jobs and he's working overtime and I never see him and I'm always with the kids and we don't have family, you have to tell him that because chances are he has no idea that you're actually struggling. Communication goes both ways. And I feel like the spouses are just as bad at internalizing and not dealing with their feelings as the responders are. They don't even think about it because it's like, well, I'm struggling because I had to discipline the same kid 18 times over the same thing today. I didn't have a dead kid call or something like that. And so we start to have this internal competition of like, well, what I'm dealing with isn't what he's dealing with, so I should just keep my mouth shut. And that's why I post a lot of the stuff that I post is to encourage you that what you're dealing with is hard and those feelings are valid and it's not a competition.
Yeah.
You just have different things that you're struggling with and you both need to talk to each other about.
Yep, that's exactly what your post that I commented on today, because it is there. You're doing different things.
Mhm.
Put me at home with 4 kids under 6 and under. Nope. I'll take a robbery in progress. Thank you very
That's what
much.
my husband says all the
Thank
time
you very
when he
much.
is home. He tells me, he's like, "How do you do this
No,
all day?"
no, no. And Michelle still goes out of town. She goes, I'm worried about leaving town. By the way, this was last week. I'm worried about leaving town. I'm like, they're 20 and 18. They both drive. They have Amexes. They have jobs. Well, who's going to feed the kids? Chick-fil-A, likely, if they're not going to eat what I'm fixing. And she's just kind of looking at me like, I'm so, so worried. I'm like,
Yeah.
we're going to be all right. Yeah, and nobody lost weight, so we're good.
Yep.
But it's just so funny that, and you're right. I don't know if I was deaf to it or that I just saw that she's a superhero. I mean, it's a mom superpower. She's got this, and
Yeah.
maybe no, I was completely self-absorbed and involved with what I was doing at work and trying to achieve there. That even if she had written it on a brick and hit me in the face, I would have been deaf to it. It was all me. Could communication have been better on both sides? Absolutely, but you've got to own your part of it. Yeah. So that's great stuff. We have barely talked about Little Blue Crew. What is it specifically that y'all do?
So the nonprofit right now started as care packages. So we basically, we've done line of duty primarily, but we have done other stuff that hasn't been line of duty. And that's really important to me to make sure that the families feel supported, even if it doesn't happen at work. So we've done for a family who had a baby in the NICU. We've done one for a family who had an off-duty motorcycle accident. Almost didn't make it. Praise the Lord that he did, though. But that's kind of how it started. And then we started what's called a Leo box, and it's kind of morphed a little bit. But basically, we're taking nominations from anybody, the community, the family, the department, for a cop who's just a good cop and a good person, and a good father and husband or mother or wife if it's the female. And we just want to be able to recognize the good cops that don't get recognized. And so what that kind of has morphed into is they get a basket of some goodies that we've collected, and then we do snacks and drinks for their whole either platoon or unit or team, depending on who it is. We've also done some fundraisers for families who have had an injury on the job or just some big financial need, something related to that. What we are hoping to get into in 2026 is starting to move more towards adding mentorship in. And also, I'm currently writing what I thought was just going to be like a downloadable PDF, but it's turning into a book, and I don't know what to think about that. But it's basically going to be a family resource guide. It's very tactical on how to show up for other law enforcement families, what to look for as far as hypervigilance in the spouse, hypervigilance in the responder. It's going to cover work-related injuries. It's going to cover talking about things with your kids. So kind of moving into actual mentorship and having those conversations with retired law enforcement officers and then also current law enforcement families, opening those channels of communication for people who just want to improve, not obviously specialized therapy needs at that point, but just kind of those support groups and mentorship kind of things.
Okay, well, this might surprise you, but I got a couple things to say. So
Okay.
as far as the Blue Crew, basically you find a gap and you stand in there. You're basically handing out warm hugs for your tribe, because it just sounds to me like you're just loving on everybody who needs to love. And I love that. As far as the downloadable PDF and you don't know what to think about maybe writing a book, I wholeheartedly adamantly suggest, urge, and want to inspire you to write the book. I guarantee you, I don't even know how many followers you have on your social medias combined. I know it's a lot. I know that you get tons of comments and likes, and just the algorithm of that. I mean, you're doing all the right things for all of the right reasons, and it's speaking to people. There are people out there waiting to get more of what it is that you're giving, and you've got to do it in a book. You have to. And if it's something you decide to do, I would love to have you back on so we could talk about that and what's in it and help you get that out to people. Man, that's exciting. I think everybody needs a little more Blue Crew, and the fact that you're in South Carolina, I think you should probably look at franchising. And by franchising, I mean saying, here's how I did it. You should do this in your state and your jurisdiction as well. I think it's great. I really do.
Well, thank you.
You know, when your kids get older and they look back at, at all the things that mom built and all the things that you were doing for the community, the little Blue Crew, what do you hope that they learn from watching you? Just mom's a superhero. What is it you hope they learn?
I am definitely not. And if anything, I hope that they realize how human I am.
Well, that's the beauty of what you're
they're-
doing, though. I think that's the wonderfulness of it all, that you're doing it so graciously and gracefully with a smile, and you're making it look easy. I know that it's not that I've done it myself, but I've seen somebody else do it. And I know
Right.
that what you're doing is not easy. Anyway, I interrupted you. Please go ahead.
No, you're good. They're one of the main reasons that we started this. And I've talked to my husband about this a lot. And I think when we went through everything that we went through and working on our marriage and working through the grief and everything that came with that, is I kept coming back to we have 4 kids. We have 2 girls and 2 boys, and it was not yes, it was we need to do this for them right now. But I also kept thinking, what if one of them grows up and joins this profession? This is not the profession that I want them to go into, not because of the law enforcement side, but because of all of the other stuff. And so it was just me kind of taking a step back and being like, what can I do to make it better? So obviously we are not encouraging or discouraging either way. Whatever God has for them is great. Whatever profession they go into, I want them to, if they see a need and they can help people, I want them to do that. That's probably the biggest thing that I want my kids to take away from that. And they're already doing that. I was teaching Saturday morning and my husband was home with the kids, and he texted me and he's like, our oldest son, who's 4.5, and then our youngest daughter, who is 2.5, they were putting together care packages of things around the house. And he's like, they're loading them up in a wagon and they're going to go deliver them. That was completely unprompted, just something that they wanted to do on their own. And to me, it kind of made me tear up a little bit, because even at those young ages of 2 and 4, they're recognizing what we're doing because they're with me all the time and they see them being delivered, and they already have that heart behind it. What more could I ask for?
Oh God, I love every bit of that. That's incredible. All right, and last question for you, and then I'll let you talk about whatever you want, I promise. If you had every first responder spouse in the country in one room and you had 60 seconds with them, not that you need all 60 seconds, or if you had more than 60 seconds, what would you say to them?
I think the biggest thing is just don't be afraid to ask for help. I feel like 99% of the issues that I see and that people message me about is you need to acknowledge that this is really hard and you're struggling and you need some kind of help. Sometimes it can people bring us meals while my husband is laid up because I'm having to do everything for everybody and that's too much on my plate. Or I need to get childcare so I can I can go with my husband to therapy. Or even just, I don't know how to talk about my feelings. I know that I'm having feelings. I may not even know how to label them, but I need to talk to somebody about that. I think that is the overarching theme, both physical needs of law enforcement families, but also the mental and emotional and spiritual needs of law enforcement families is just as a group, because we're the ones serving and protecting and helping other people, we are almost allergic to asking for help ourselves. And I want people to realize that it's not weakness. You're not going to be looked down upon, but like, we don't know how to help you if you don't say that you need help.
Wow. I think that is that's a message transferable to the other side of the marriage as well. What do you want to talk about? You've indulged me for all this time. What messages do you want to get out?
I don't know. I feel like I have so many and I have a tendency to ramble. I want
Hey,
to
me
try
too.
and
It's
stay.
okay.
Yeah, I want to like stay focused on the goal. But there's just such a need. Like if I could leave anybody listening with one thing, it's just don't wait on somebody else to start something. Don't wait on somebody else to be like, hey, can you come help me put together a care package? Be the one to do it. If you have somebody in your department who, like we just had a NICU baby, be like, hey, is somebody setting up a meal train for you? Can we come clean your house? Can we do something like that? And a lot of times those mental and emotional conversations will usually come, but especially with somebody going through it, whether they're dealing with burnout just from their spouse being gone all the time because they're trying to make ends meet because this economy is nuts, or they're actually dealing with some kind of illness or injury, or they had a critical incident, anything like that. I feel like just be the one that shows up for people. And I promise you, people will start showing up for you too. But you've got to be the one. Don't wait for anybody else to do it. You've got to stand up and be like, hey, there's a need. Let's go figure out how we can meet that need.
Leadership is contagious. Where can everybody, well, first, how can everybody support the Blue Crew?
So social media engagement is huge. Obviously, you mentioned before, you're terrible at asking for money. So am I. Obviously, we could not do what we do without donations from people. And you can find information about that and donate directly on thebluecrew.org. That's our website. But even if you're not able to do that, just pray for us that we would be able to help people as God would have us help people, and that we would find the people that need help. And also engaging with our socials just helps get the word out and the message out there. So our nonprofit is at thebluecrew.official on Instagram, and then iamlittle.blue.crew on Instagram.
And you post great stuff. I don't want you to give away the secret of who does your social media. And you're probably going to tell me it's you and all you, which is going to drive me nuts because I think it's so beautifully done, so well done, so thoughtful. And I
Well,
really
thank
do. I
you.
think it's great. It's like, God, man, it's just, I wish I could do that because I got to be careful the way that I speak to myself. I don't suck at it, but I'm no longer horrible at it. We'll say that.
Yeah.
So
Well, if you look way back when I first started, I don't think anything you do could be worse than that. So
challenge accepted.
we've come a long way.
I've really, really enjoyed our time together. I appreciate you taking the time to share some of this with us. And
Thank you so much for having me.
no, thank you. Folks, thanks for joining us here on Tell This Story. We've had a great opportunity to sit down with Breanna and hear about the Blue Crew and everything that they're doing and all the wonderful wisdom that she's packed in such a short amount of time. If this resonated with you, please make sure that you send this podcast to other people. Make sure you follow the little Blue Crew and everything that she's doing on her wonderful journey. Until next time, we'll talk to you later. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of Tell This Story. Thank you for staying in the fight. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with one person who needs it. Check out the show notes for our guest contact information and all their socials. Follow Tell This Story on the platform of your choice. Hit like and subscribe. Every rating helps get our voices to the people who need it most. Get your copy of my book, Hiding in Plain Sight, The Truth About Trauma, Service, and the Way Forward. It's now available on Audible, and you can get it anywhere you get your books. Tap into more information about this platform or resources for vets, responders, and their families at DougWhiteOfficial.com. We'll see you next time.